Good morning, Kartik. A warm welcome to you on behalf of APAC News Network. APAC News Network is a media organization headquartered out of Noida. We are being particularly strong till now in government, healthcare, and education. In fact, perhaps in last 1 year, the only B2B media which even had Prime Minister Modi in one of our platforms. Now we are enhancing the focus also on enterprise IT and BFSI, and the idea is to see that the all the communities synergize with each other and how we can reach out with in a 360-degree approach to everyone. So today's discussion, what we would like to know is first an update on the solutions and services that are available from Tenable now. Then on those solutions and services, we'd particularly like to talk about the last 1.5 year during the pandemic. What had happened is with many people working from home, very divergent, heterogeneous networks have come into the system, and that meant a lot of security issues. So, how did the Tenable solutions manage that? The cyber exposure risk, which you specializes in, so a little bit on use cases around that and how across verticals that in, and also what is your go-to-market strategy. So maybe the best would be if we can start with what are the Tenable solutions and services in your portfolio that you offer currently.
Good morning to you, and thank you so much for having me on this interview. And all that you've said is very, very relevant to today's market situation. And I will speak about most of what you've asked me to do so. I'll start with the Tenable portfolio to just give an idea of what we have and where are we trending. So essentially, if we look at it, most people will find the name Nessus very, very familiar. And that's our scanning engine. And a lot of organizations use it extensively. We have gone ahead and augmented the base scanning engine to now start providing more enterprise level information so that customers can benefit from it. So the scan engine output is now taken and there's relevance and context added to it so that they can take actionable decisions on that output. So to start with, we have a on-premise version, which is called the T.SC or the Security Center. There is a cloud version of it, which is called T.IO. And then to add to this, over the years, we've gone ahead and put in a few more elements, which makes it very, very not only robust, but more contextual in nature. So we've got a product called Lumen, which is able to provide organizations with the ability to see the cyber exposure score, which is a discrete and quantifiable score to say, where are they versus a baseline, either an industry baseline or an internal baseline that they set up. So that is helping our customers to see where is their security at any point in time. The whole thing is now packaged into a beautiful thing called Tenable EP, which is the platform that allows you to procure all these products and use them as you require them. In most cases, what would happen is people would buy licenses and then buy dashboards and buy platforms, and then they had to have specific numbers. EP gives you the flexibility to use what you really need. So that's another new one that's come about. And to add to it, in the last year and a half, we've gone ahead and added a couple of new products. One, of course, is called the OT part of our portfolio, which allows plants and manufacturing organizations to see their vulnerability conditions because of the IT confluence that's taken place. So the OT IT confluence is now on a single dashboard. So it gives you a much, much richer experience of seeing what your enterprise layout is. Another new acquisition has been with AD. So AD in most cases is used by large organizations. And one of the things that commonly happen in AD is misconfigurations and also mismanagement. And that can now be shown on a single dashboard. So without getting into too much detail, just giving you a very quick snapshot of what we have on our portfolio. With the cloud migration and a lot of people moving to the cloud, we've also put a brand new MSSP portal, which allows our partners to very, very quickly deploy solutions and very quickly get it into a production mode. So those are some of the latest variants of our product portfolio.
Thank you. I have one question from here. My next question was anyway, during the pandemic, how did you manage the security with many people working from home? But what that meant was many enterprises shifted towards cloud. And you talked about Lumen and EP, where basically a cyber exposure score is determined. Now, say enterprises who have been working in a certain mode in the pre-pandemic time, and they had a certain level of cyber exposure and a score. Now suddenly they shift to cloud. uh, Plus, more importantly, their security vulnerabilities suddenly got enhanced with so many people connecting from different devices, from different network. So the cyber exposure also just went haywire. So how did you dynamically manage this shift, and with especially most enterprises migrating to cloud also, the shift in their cyber exposure scores?
Right. So what we also realized was that when this entire pandemic broke out, people had to very, very quickly scramble and get their workforces connected to their enterprises and the resources that were there. Now, while this was being done, the whole focus was towards communication, getting it connected, getting the endpoints to their users. And so security for a minute took a bit of a back step. Also, this enhanced that whole digital transformation which has been happening into a high gear. That said, now the question was, the board asked many of the senior management in security, how secure are we with this current situation? And for them to answer, we are good, we are very secure, doesn't actually come out as a discrete answer. Now, the discrete answer is, here's the baseline using Lumen, here's where we were, and here's where we are. So this is able to quantify to the management whether they're trending in the right direction with all the security investments that they're doing. Or alternatively, we were high and now we are lower. And so we need to invest in certain security solutions to be able to manage it. Another element that came up was interesting. With all these new parameters in play, the number of vulnerabilities that come up are huge. There's so much that it becomes difficult for anyone to say which are the most important ones. And so, using one of our tools, which is called VPR, which stands for Vulnerability Priority Rating, you can then figure out which are the vulnerabilities that are going to impact your business. which are your critical assets that really, really need to be protected first. So the priority rating suddenly made managing your vulnerabilities much, much more easier for the larger organizations. So two of the elements that really made a difference, and I can say that very, very confidently because I've had these conversations with a lot of customers in the BFSI segment, in many of the government organizations, and they all had the same question: how do we manage these hundreds of vulnerabilities? And we said, run VPR, and you'll know which are the most important ones. Fix those and check your cyber exposure score, and suddenly you'll realize that you are in a better place.
Okay, in terms of the outcomes, if we see in the last 1.5 years, especially, I'm talking since the situation is also beyond normal. Where did you see from an enterprise's side the maximum vulnerabilities come, and what were your suggestions in terms of the solutions to mitigate some of those vulnerabilities?
Two parts I like to stress on, Rajneesh. One part, of course, is to do with compliance. So many of the organizations have regulatory bodies that are extremely strict about what compliance needs to be met. So a lot of the solutions being provided by people will just meet compliance. Now, the question is, does meeting compliance actually help an organization? Well, it helps an organization from meeting compliance, but it doesn't help them from assessing their real risk. So, by having a cyber exposure score or a VPR, they are able to not only meet compliance but also get a richer context on what they need to work upon. So this has been a really important part for many organizations. The other one was that a number of organizations found that with all the new technologies coming in, there was a requirement to see in the limited budget, where do they spend their money? I mean, you have these vulnerabilities, but once it's prioritized, you know what technology to invest in to fix the most critical assets that keeps your business up and running. So both these elements played a big part in being able to help organizations keep their business running. The third element, which was there, is that people would scan their environment maybe once or twice in a year, but vulnerabilities are coming every single day. And with this open, extended perimeter, unless you have continuous monitoring, it's very difficult to say that you're safe. So by having the ability with the Tenable products that you can scan every day, you can scan as often as you like. Now they were able to scan their networks very quickly, come out with results, and keep comparing how they are trending on a much more frequent manner than they used to in the past. And this is what fell into the realm of cyber hygiene. And so it made a huge difference to many of these organizations.
That's interesting. An immediate corollary to it, I'd like to ask two parts. I thought about asking this question later, but it's connected. One, I would like to understand what is Tenable's go-to-market strategy with respect to India specifically, and what sort of go-to-market and the channel that you follow. But also, what I'd like to understand exactly the 3 points that you emphasized. Now, how is the operating business model? Because there are certain solution which will be provided by other solution providers and other OEMs. So, do you work in conjunction or in a consortium kind of model with some other certain other security vendors So when the VPR or the exposure score you mentioned, so that the enterprise can take necessary actions with certain solutions immediately. So how does that work?
So what I'll do, Rajneesh, is I'll go first on the last part of your question and then go to the first part of the question because that'll help understand how we go to market. So we notice that there are organizations which already have a lot of technology with them. And just because they get in one technology, they should not be limited in any way or manner. So we have these open APIs which allow us integration with all technologies. Some of them are just built out of the box. You just connect them and start working. There are remediation solutions which we have, out of the box with a big fix. There are PIM solutions that we work with as CyberArk. So these are just examples. There are hundreds of other vendors there that we can integrate with. And so what we do is once we get this solution and the scores up, and the customer turns around and says, "Now tell me what do I do?" And we see the environment and say, "You've got these solutions. Let's integrate them." And so we've got a very, very developed professional services organization that will step in and help integrate our solution to other solutions that exist in their environment. That said, we are 100% channel organization. So we've got tier one, tier two, and tier three channels. The tier one channels are the ones that are global system integrators, large system integrators. The tier two are more like regional partners. And then the tier three are the ones who are more reseller kind of partners. And for all of them, we go through that whole process of being able to train them on pre sales and then post sales. And we will support them with the requirements that they need to integrate and deploy at a customer end. So we're 100% channel company. We do not do direct sales in the market. So our GTM basically then looks at how can we get our partners skilled to be able to meet the customer requirements, and wherever needed, we will be with them to do demonstrations, to do other activities in terms of deployment, and then of course we'll also do professional services. We have our distribution company, which has got a COE that runs various technologies integrated with the Tenable solutions. So if a customer would like to have a look at that, we do that. They also help in training of our partners from time to time. So essentially, this whole ecosystem, all put together, works in a very, very conducive manner in being able to get the customer what they need.
Okay, thank you. One addition from here, as you mentioned, that these three tiers of partners, and let's stick to the maybe the first two tiers, not talk about the reseller and how they function. And also, what had happened in the last 1.5 year, as you said, those three situations that you talked about, and a lot of changes also happened. So, what about there were many of these existing SLAs, which were in the pre-pandemic days, these partners had with the customers, and suddenly the whole dynamics of the arrangement changed. How did that impact the SLAs, and how did Tenable help the partners manage that changes in SLAs in that situation?
Rajnish, actually speaking, because we are more of a software based solution and we operate both at a on-premise and as well as a cloud platform, we our support structure didn't have too much of a change because we were still providing them the remote support through phone, internet, um, and also having conversations with the partners who would go on site and require help there. So, from a working or support perspective, there was not much that we had to do and change. Um, the places where I guess you're referring to could be because of the lockdown. There were times when organizations would require hands and feet on site, and because of the lockdown, it became very difficult for people to go on site. So, what we did do was we managed to have certain software tools that would allow a customer to connect onto the portal and run tests through that, and that information then gets pushed back to our support, and our support could easily then decipher what's required to be done, and we would instruct and try and push and things do things on the internet. From a deployment perspective, we could push and we could deploy our software remotely. So we did not have a problem there. So from a support SLA perspective, we were good. From a product deployment perspective, we were good. So actually, the pandemic really did not impact us and the partners too adversely.
And just a continuation of that, how did you balance between, was it looking more at the existing customers only and enhancing the depth of the engagement with those existing customers, or vis-a-vis acquisition of new customers? So, how were you balancing between the two?
Surprisingly, we had a lot of new customers. Uh, while we had our existing customers, and they did go into more depth with our products and solutions, but I'll tell you, in our government sector, we did quite a lot of business, and we did expand on many of the other enterprises. Even the ITS segment, we did expand because suddenly all those people who were in call centers and other establishments started operating from home. So we had to help out these new requirements that came up also. So I'd say there was a growth, definitely a good growth in business, specifically for our government sector um, and enterprises.
So now my next question was this vertical wise. So government is one, the BFSI is obviously always, and ITIT as you mentioned. So overall, what sort of traction you saw between these different verticals? And more importantly, what sort of use cases is vertical specific, and wherever if the customers are referenceable, if you can mention some names or give some ideas about in government sector or BFSI, what sort of organizations use Tenable?
Okay, so in the verticals, when we talk about it, I mentioned that we acquired a company in the OT space. So manufacturing has become a major set of customers for us. So manufacturing for the longest period of time would work in an air gapped situation of this is my plant and this is my IT, and they're not connected, so there are no threats. But that's changed. And so now OT and IT have kind of got together. The threat landscape has changed completely. So a brand new set of customers came up, and we are in a very, very unique position to be one of the only companies that does OT and IT on a single pane of glass. So we had this massive influx of an OT IT integration solution. So manufacturing came up as a new segment that we had to work on. The other segment that came up is around AD. Large organizations and enterprises, almost, I mean, I'd say more than 76% of the top 1,000 companies use AD. And AD misconfigurations and mismanagement is pretty common. So by getting this solution together, this brand new segment of enterprises became part of our new customer focus. So, rightly said, there's manufacturing, government, BFSI, ITES, and then the larger enterprises that use the products.
So within government, what sort of organizations or government sectors were using some of these solutions?
So, within the government, the Ministry of Home Affairs has a bunch of it, and just to be very, very, very frank with you, no one's very happy if I mention any specific organization. But yes, the Ministry of Home Affairs invested quite a lot with us. There was also the utility companies. So think of the power generation companies, which are more in that manufacturing, oil and gas, more in the manufacturing part of the business with the OTIT. So oil and gas is one large component. Um, MHA is another large component. The other component is also sensitive data management. So the intelligence bureaus and others would also be customers of ours.
Okay, and since you mentioned that OT part about the manufacturing, see, that has been even historically what we have seen many of these IoT deployments. Why they don't work is while many organizations have gained expertise on the IT part. It's the OT part where the all the challenges come, and that's where the IoT implementation finally don't work out. As you mentioned, the Tenable you are providing on that single platform, both the IT and OT. So, how in the last, if we may say, last few quarters, how are things changing, and how far have you helped in manufacturing organizations specifically change on that IoT deployment front?
Okay, it's a very, very interesting question and a great question, Rajneesh. And I'll tell you why. Um, if we look at the priorities of a plant versus the priorities of IT, they are very, very different. So, till now, the biggest problem was OT functioned in a silo, IT functioned in a silo. OT had a certain set of priorities, IT had another set of priorities, and these priorities never gelled together. So, to try and get two sets of ideology to look at what the real issue is very difficult. When you bring it all into a single pane, then both parties can see what they need to prioritize in. And I'll give you a real example. If we look at a manufacturing plant, what are some of the highest priorities? Priority number one, employee employee health and safety, uptime of the plant, security and safety of the plant. Those are the highest priorities that a plant would have. On the other side, if you look at IT, what is this? Security of the data, security to see that there are no data breaches, exfiltration of data, and access of data. So these are priorities of an IT part of the business. Now, when you get them both together, they both don't seem to gel, right? When you look at that on a single pane of glass and say, here are your critical assets, here is your issue, and this is what's going to be the outcome if any of these critical assets go down. And now both of them can look at it and come to a common priority list. And that has changed the way these organizations are being able to work together and come to a common solution.
Okay. Understand that. And another thing I just wanted to know, since you offer both on-premise and cloud solution, and what we are seeing is many of the enterprises moving towards cloud. So, Tenable business wise, what is the proportion still between on premise and cloud?
Um, I would say that at this point in time, because the cloud is slowly, and the SaaS requirements are slowly going up, what used to be a traditional on premise in the last year or so is seeing a trend towards the cloud. So there's more and more that's going towards the cloud than on premise. But having said that, it's not for every single vertical. There's certain verticals that still stick to on premise and would want it there. Banking and finance is one such segment which likes to have, due to regulatory restrictions and due to many of the ways that they operate, they like a large part of their solution to be on premise. They require some which is customer end and transaction end that they move to the cloud, but they do require a good proportion there. There are aggregators and payment gateways that are moving all the way into the cloud. So for them, it's more cloud than on premise. So what we are seeing is there is uh, the shift to more towards the cloud now, but it doesn't mean that the on-premise is reducing. So the growth on on-premise compared to say in cloud probably is going on a regular basis, and this is climbing faster.
Okay. And one more thing I wanted to understand is how has the conversation with the CISOs of enterprise changed? And in fact, what's exactly the role of the CISOs, and what is the involvement of the other management part also, other than the CISO himself?
Right. So that's a question rightly asked at this point in time, because just a couple of weeks ago I was having a conversation with some of the CISOs, and I asked the same question: how does the board view your role in today's situation? And they said, Karthik, you know what? It's really exciting. It's exciting because I don't have to fight that hard to get budgets and run it. My budget sizes have increased dramatically. So from being single digits, they have become double digits. The board has very clearly mandated that do what you require to do to keep that business going. And really, what's the other factor that's contributed to it is that once people started working from home, organizations also realized, as well as employees realized, that everyone does not need to be in a bounded perimeter or an office. They function as well working from home. So now the new normal, even when the lockdowns finish and even when everyone comes back to work, the proportion of people working from home is going to be much higher than before the pandemic, right? So before the pandemic, everyone went to office, but after this, there will probably be a large part of the workforce that will work from home. And so the whole IT structure will now change, and they will have to look at ways and means of securing this boundless perimeter of theirs. So it's an interesting thing. CISOs are being held responsible for managing bounded as well as unbounded perimeters, and their budgets definitely are going up for security.
That's great. So the finally, last question I'd like to ask, obviously, in terms of looking forward, what are going to be your focus areas? So that can be in terms of new features, new solutions, expansion into newer verticals, or even a geographical expansion, or what are going to be the key focus areas for the next few quarters at least?
I think we've had very, very rapid growth as a company. We have got a very, very good board as well as a management team, and they are looking way ahead into the future in growing Tenable into almost the best company that would be dealing with technologies related to vulnerability management. If you look at it, in the last 1.5 years, we've had three acquisitions, and all three are very unique and have placed us in a very unique situation. OT and IT confluence, we're leading that pack with having both the technologies and being able to give our customers a single pane of glass. We've looked at AD, which is another new requirement, which is needed by the industry, and we've acquired that. We had for the cloud frictionless using native agents for scanning and making it easier for our customers when they go into the cloud. All these acquisitions are all adjacent to our core vulnerability solutions, and it's growing it, making it richer in context for our customers. And the way that I look at it with the last three acquisitions, I'm hoping that we carry on this growth the way it is, and we'll have another conversation in a year or so, which will say this is where we've come from a year ago.
Great, and thanks for taking out time. And it was great interacting with you.
Same here, Rajneesh. Lovely speaking to you, and let's hope we can catch up. And I'll keep updating you on what's happening at our end.
Sure, definitely.